Ever wondered where nightmares are made? Welcome to some of the most terrifying prisons on Earth. Scary places for cartel members that surpass the worst horrors you can imagine. Take Cartel in El Salvador, a sprawling fortress where inmates endure severe overcrowding, minimal sanitation, and relentless psychological torture. Or the infamous Apodaca prison in Mexico, a scene of deadly riots and shocking betrayals. And over in Brazil, the chaos at Monte Cristo, with riots that often end in beheadings and burnings, takes brutality to another level. These are not just prisons, they are glimpses into hell itself. Dive deeper with us into these dark places on Earth where humanity ceases to exist. Cartel. If there's one prison that the cartel members fear the most, it is the Centro de Confinamiento del Terrorismo, more commonly known as CCOT. Located in Tecoluca, El Salvador, this maximum security prison was specifically built in late 2022 to counter deadly cartels and gangsters. And in just about 2 years, the government's massive crackdown has already resulted in the facility holding 14,532 prisoners. Most strikingly, it is the largest prison in Latin America with a capacity of 40,000 inmates. However, this does not mean the inmates are kept in isolation. Quite the opposite. The 8 cell blocks within CCOT cover approximately 50,000 square meters and are further divided into smaller modules. Each module crams over 100 inmates into tight spaces with just 2 toilets and 2 washing basins. There are no mattresses, and each inmate gets only 0.6 square meters of space. To put that into perspective, a large doormat outside a front door can be around 0.9 meters long. Prisoners are fed rice, beans, pasta, and hard-boiled eggs, and must eat with their hands, as the guards consider forks and knives potential weapons. Inmates wear a uniform consisting of a white shirt and white shorts, and their heads are shaved every 5 days. They are allowed outside their cells for only 30 minutes a day to exercise while shackled. There is no other time allocated for any activity. There are also no visitation rights for those incarcerated in CCOT, nor are they allowed to have phone contact with the outside world. Moreover, the lights are never turned off in this prison. Once inside, it is said that inmates will only leave after serving their sentence, which is already a lengthy sentence in the first place. Since its opening, CCOT has faced widespread allegations of human rights violations. The mental torture inflicted on prisoners is so extreme that many have labeled it the worst prison on Earth. CCOT isn't the only prison known for its harsh conditions. Up next is another notorious prison with its own dark reputation and chilling stories. Apodaca Prison. Considered one of the most overcrowded prisons in the world, Apodaca was built to hold just 1,500 inmates. It currently holds close to 3,000 prisoners, doubling its intended capacity. As a result, this overcrowding has significantly strained the prison's infrastructure and management, contributing to frequent violence and instability within the facility. So much so that authorities were warned that a riot could break out due to the inhumane treatment of inmates in the prison, but no action was taken. And that turned out to be a big mistake, as the Apodaca prison turned into a bloody massacre on the 19th of February 2012. The riot at Apodaca prison wasn't just chaos. It was a bloodbath between 2 of Mexico's most dangerous drug cartels, Los Zetas and the Gulf Cartel. What started as a violent brawl ended with 44 confirmed deaths, though some reports suggest the body count was actually over 70. The fight kicked off around 2 a.m., with inmates from one high-security block storming into another while the guards stood by, letting the Zetas ambush the Gulf Cartel members in their sleep. During the carnage, prisoners set mattresses on fire, took a guard hostage, and used makeshift weapons, including knives, stones, and burning objects, to slaughter their rivals. Some even claim firearms were involved. But it wasn't just a riot between 2 cartels. Experts believe the riot was just a distraction for a jailbreak. That same day, 30 Zetas members escaped, including Oscar Manuel Bernal, known as La Arana, the Spider, a feared leader in Monterrey. And this wasn't the first time Apodaca turned deadly. In 2011, a fight left 20 inmates dead and 12 severely injured. Just months later, a fire ripped through the prison's psychiatric ward, killing 14 and injuring 35 more. To this day, no one knows for sure what caused the fire, adding yet another layer to Apodaca's terrifying legacy. Up next is another prison where survival hangs by a thread and the violence reaches unimaginable levels. Agricultural Penitentiary of Monte Cristo. What happens behind the walls of this prison is nothing short of a nightmare, where no one is safe, not even for a second. This prison in Roraima State had already reached its capacity of 1,400 inmates when a deadly riot broke out. The riot began when inmates from one wing of the Agricola de Monte Cristo prison broke into another, armed with knives and wooden clubs and ready for blood. The clash between 2 rival cartels resulted in the deaths of 25 prisoners, but the sheer brutality of the killings shocked even the most hardened observers. 7 inmates were beheaded, while 6 were burned alive in the chaos. Even more chilling is that this wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a wave of deadly riots. Just a day earlier, 56 prisoners were massacred at the Anicio Jobim Penitentiary Complex in Manaus when rival drug cartels, Primeiro Comando de Capital and Familia do Norte, clashed in what would become one of the deadliest incidents in the history of Brazil's prison system. The next day, the violence continued as 4 more inmates were killed in another Manaus prison. These back-to-back uprisings exposed the grim reality of Brazil's overcrowded and underfunded penal system, where prisons have become battlegrounds for cartel wars and survival often comes down to luck or sheer brutality. The next prison I'm going to discuss is infamous for the inhumane treatment of inmates and extreme examples of negligence shown by the authorities. Comayagua Prison. The Comayagua prison in Honduras has gained a horrifying reputation due to the cruel treatment of inmates, especially after the devastating fire that occurred in 2012. This overcrowded facility, designed to house 250 inmates but holding over 850, became the scene of a massive tragedy. Reports describe how prisoners were trapped behind locked doors as a fire broke out, with some guards abandoning their posts, leaving inmates to die helplessly. Many prisoners, desperate to escape the flames, crowded into bathrooms to find water, but the flames claimed the lives of 361 inmates, making it the deadliest prison fire ever recorded. This event exposed deeper issues within the Honduran prison system, where inmates frequently suffer from harsh conditions. The prisons are severely underfunded, with only a tiny fraction of the budget allocated to a basic necessity like food. Many detainees, including cartel members, are held for years without trial due to systemic corruption and delays, worsening the overcrowding problem. Moreover, violence among inmates and the control exerted by criminal gangs inside the facilities contribute to an environment where survival becomes a daily challenge. Up next is the darkest place on earth for cartel members that is known as the Prison of Death, La Modelo Prison. This prison in Bogotá, Colombia is infamous for its extreme violence and deplorable conditions. The facility is divided into sections controlled by different factions, including drug traffickers, paramilitaries, and guerrilla groups, which frequently engage in violent clashes. The rivalry between these groups makes the prison a battleground, resulting in deaths and injuries that add to its grim reputation. In March 2020, a riot protesting the prison's unsanitary conditions and overcrowding resulted in the deaths of 24 inmates. Prisoners across the country were protesting against overcrowding as well as poor health services ever since the outbreak of COVID-19. Investigations revealed that many of these deaths were not accidents, but intentional killings by guards using live ammunition, sparking outrage about the excessive use of force. Some inmates were reportedly shot with the intent to kill, according to forensic experts who reviewed autopsy reports. Additionally, the prison has faced allegations of inhumane treatment, with inmates enduring overcrowding, lack of medical care, and inadequate access to water and sanitation. Guards are often accused of negligence or corruption, contributing to the prison's instability and making it a dangerous place where survival often depends on brute strength and alliances. One of the inmates recalled the harrowing treatment in the prison. He said, "Sometimes when a prisoner had complained about something, the guards would take them away at nighttime and whip them. Some died in the basements, and we could hear their screams." Next up is another prison that is infamous for 2 reasons: the barbaric treatment of inmates and the high-profile escape of one of the most wanted drug lords in the world, Altiplano Prison. Located in central Mexico, Altiplano Prison is designed as a maximum security facility, notorious for its strict confinement protocols. However, these measures have done little to prevent controversies. Conditions inside the prison are harsh and oppressive, with inmates often subjected to psychological abuse, isolation, and limited access to basic amenities. Prisoners report minimal health care, poor hygiene standards, and routine mistreatment from guards. Altiplano Prison became infamous not only for the inhumane treatment of inmates, but also for the daring escape of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. The notorious leader of the Sinaloa cartel escaped through a mile-long tunnel meticulously dug from the shower area of his cell, a spot carefully selected to avoid surveillance. The tunnel, outfitted with lighting, ventilation, and a motorcycle on tracks, allowed El Chapo to travel underground undetected. On the night of his escape, he climbed into the tunnel and emerged in a nearby construction site. His escape exposed systemic corruption, with investigations revealing that several prison officials were bribed to overlook the activity that enabled his getaway. By the way, El Chapo broke out of another prison in 2001 by hiding in a laundry basket after bribing prison officials. El Chapo was recaptured later and then sent to another horrible prison on Earth that is often called the Alcatraz of the Rockies, ADX Florence. This federal supermax prison in Colorado is infamous for extreme and prolonged solitary confinement of inmates. In fact, calling the ADX Florence a death sentence would be an understatement. Designed to hold the most dangerous criminals, including terrorists and drug lords, the prison is notorious for its near-total isolation practices. Inmates are confined to small, soundproof cells for 24 hours a day, often for years, with minimal human contact. As a result, many prisoners develop severe mental health issues, including psychosis, paranoia, and depression, due to the long periods of solitary confinement. Robert Hood, a former warden at the ADX, said that the ADX was not designed for humanity. When it's 23 hours a day in a room with a slit of a window where you can't even see the Rocky Mountains, let's be candid here. It's not designed for rehabilitation. Period. End of story. Moreover, the inmates receive all their meals through a slot in the cell door, and their only glimpse of the outside world is through a thin slit of a window aimed at an empty sky. This deprives prisoners of learning the layout of the prison and the location of their cells. There is a single 4-inch slit for a window, a bed, desk, and stool made of poured concrete, and stainless steel sink and toilet combo. Pending good behavior, prisoners can earn 10 or more hours per week handcuffed outside of their cells in a caged confinement or a concrete pit. The only time that inmates are allowed out of their cells is for an hour of exercise. Handcuffed and shackled at their feet, inmates are either led to an empty room with a single pull-up bar or taken outside to the yard, where they are locked alone inside a caged pen. In addition, up to 4 15-minute phone calls are allowed per month, and visitation rights are significantly restricted, if allowed at all. By the way, El Chapo is serving a life sentence plus 30 years in ADX Florence for 10 charges related to narcotics trafficking, money laundering, and weapons. Next up is another hell on earth, a prison specifically designed to crush even the most hardened criminals, including notorious cartel members. Cerezo No. 3 Prison. Cerezo No. 3 prison in Ciudad Juarez is known for its horrific conditions and violent environment. Due to the prison's gang-style culture, violence occurs on an almost daily basis, with various attacks also coming from outside its walls. On January 1st, 2023, a riot broke out when armed gunmen stormed the prison, killing at least 10 guards, 7 inmates, and 2 gunmen. The attack was orchestrated to allow 20 high-profile cartel members to escape. According to the government officials, the prison is known to be run by members of an organized crime group known as the Mexicals. Over the years, this group has planned and ordered attacks on the city of Juarez from inside the prison inside. Life is a nightmare. Inmates are crammed into overcrowded, filthy cells with little to no medical care, forced to endure beatings from both guards and rival prisoners. In there, inmates are often denied proper food and live in fear of being abused by other inmates or the guards. It won't be wrong to say that Cerezo No. 3 is a place where survival depends on strength and alliances, and where death is a constant presence. For those inside, every day feels like a battle to stay alive, with no guarantee of ever leaving the hellish walls of the prison. Cerezo No. 3 is where fear hangs heavy in the air, but there's another prison known for its own brand of brutality. Maracaibo Prison. Maracaibo National Prison, also known as Sabaneta Prison, is one of Venezuela's most violent and overcrowded correctional facilities. Built to hold 700 inmates, it houses over 3,700 criminals. The prison is notorious for being run by prisoners themselves, much like 80% of Venezuelan prisons. Inside, gang violence is rampant, with regular riots and deadly confrontations between rival cartels. One of the most infamous incidents occurred in 1994, when a fire and subsequent violence left over 100 prisoners dead. Living conditions in Maracaibo Prison are the worst, with inmates suffering from overcrowding, lack of medical care, and severe malnutrition. In some cases, prisoners' children are also forced to live inside the prison. Weapons and drugs are common, as it is the case with many prisons that have cartel members inside. In fact, a raid once uncovered a shocking private zoo, including endangered animals, within the prison. The Venezuelan government ultimately shut down the prison in 2013, following a violent riot that left 16 inmates dead. However, it was reopened in 2023. The next prison on the list is often called a nightmare for criminals, for all the right reasons. La Sabaneta Prison. La Sabaneta is a grim testament to the collapse of Venezuela's prison system, a place where law and humanity have long since vanished. This infamous in Venezuela is a living nightmare, notorious for its chaotic lawlessness and inhumane conditions. Designed to house 700 inmates, the prison now holds a suffocating 3,700 prisoners, creating an environment of extreme overcrowding. With a 150 guard-to-inmate ratio, guards can do little to maintain order, leaving the prison in the hands of ruthless gangs that control every aspect of life inside Inmates are deprived of food, hygiene, and medical care, forced to survive in filthy, disease-ridden conditions. Violence is unrelenting, with clashes breaking out over scarce resources and rising tensions. Weak prisoners are preyed upon by stronger ones, and murder is a common occurrence. The lack of control from authorities creates an atmosphere where death is as routine as survival. In other words, starvation, neglect, and brutality define existence within these walls, with no hope for justice or safety. If there was an award for the most poorly managed prisons out there, the next Mexican prison on my list would definitely be a strong contender. Ciudad Barrios Prison. Ciudad Barrios Prison in El Salvador is a mess, plain and simple. It was built to hold just a few hundred people, but now it's packed with thousands of inmates. You can imagine how cramped it is. People are squeezed into cells so tight, there's barely room to lie down. The overcrowding makes everything worse, especially when it comes to hygiene. There's almost no clean water, and diseases spread fast. Tuberculosis and skin infections are common, and if you get sick, good luck finding proper medical care. The prison is basically run by gangs, with MS-13 calling most of the shots. The violence inside is constant, with gang wars happening right there between the walls. It's not just dangerous, it's terrifying. The prisoners are stuck in a cycle of fear, just trying to make it through the day, all while dealing with barely any food and the risk of being caught in a fight. On top of the physical dangers, the psychological stress of living in such terrible conditions makes things even worse. Prisoners have no real chance for rehabilitation or improving their lives, leaving them stuck in a cycle of violence and fear. Human rights groups have condemned the prison, calling it inhumane due to the filthy, unsafe, and violent environment inside. Next up is a prison that is considered one of the most dangerous facilities in Central America, housing both cartel and gang affiliates in overcrowded, brutal conditions. El Pozo Prison. This infamous prison in Honduras was built to hold 2,000 of the most dangerous criminals, especially the leaders of the gangs Mara Salvatrucha, MS-13, and Barrio 18. It was supposed to be a high-security prison to keep these gang members locked up, but inside the situation is much worse than expected. Like many prisons in Honduras, El Pozo is not fully controlled by the authorities. Instead, there's an unofficial agreement between the government and the gangs, where they share control. Not only do MS-13 and Barrio 18 rule inside the prison, but cartel gangs are also involved, making the prison extremely violent. In 2019, a fight between the gangs led to the death of 18 inmates. They used knives, guns, and machetes in a bloody clash. Just a few days later, another fight broke out, killing 18 more prisoners and wounding 16 others in a shooting. These killings weren't just random acts of violence. They were meant to send a message. Nobody should challenge the gang's control inside the prison. In response to the killings, former President Juan Orlando Hernandez ordered the army and police to take control of all 27 prisons in the country. But El Pozo has still remained a dangerous place where violence is constant and death can happen at any moment. The following is more of a graveyard than a prison because it is controlled by one of the most dangerous cartels in the world. Piedras Negras Prison. Located in Coahuila, Mexico, Piedras Negras Prison is like a base camp for the Zetas cartel. Far from being a place of rehabilitation, the prison was transformed into a nightmare, a literal graveyard. From 2010 to 2012, the Zetas used the prison not just to house their members, but as a hub for killing and disposing of bodies. The cartel systematically executed hundreds of people inside the prison and incinerated their bodies in makeshift crematoriums, with the ashes discarded in the nearby San Rodrigo River. Reports suggest that at least 150 victims were burned in the prison during the cartel's reign. Victims were reportedly taken to the prison where Zetas members would kill them in brutal ways. The Zetas ran the prison with complete authority, while local officials either turned a blind eye or were complicit in these atrocities. Inmates and civilians alike were tortured, murdered, and their bodies dissolved in acid or burned to erase all traces. This was part of a larger pattern of violence that extended beyond the prison into the surrounding areas. Though the law enforcement authorities were able to take back some of the control, the Zetas still rule this Mexican prison. The following prison has been repeatedly criticized by the Human Rights Organization for the mistreatment of inmates there. El Chipote. This prison in Nicaragua, infamous for holding political detainees and cartel suspects, has a dark reputation for severe human rights abuses and torture. Prisoners face constant, inhumane conditions designed to break their physical and mental health. Many detainees are kept in total isolation, deprived of sunlight, and subjected to frequent aggressive interrogations. They often spend days or even months without access to proper medical care, food, or contact with the outside world, including their families. Torture methods at El Chipote are brutal and varied. Prisoners Prisoners report being kept in either constant bright light or complete darkness, causing severe psychological damage. Other physical and psychological tortures include pulling nails, electrical shocks to the testicles, skull-breaking blows, kicks to the stomach, metal shards hidden in meals, asphyxiation using plastic bags, endless interrogation, cells without light or ventilation, foul-smelling water, and feces-clogged toilets. Moreover, the use of electric shocks is to such an extent that it has pushed some detainees to the brink of suicide. El Chipote continued to serve as Nicaragua's oldest and most infamous torture cells. However, there are other prisons where violence is the only law. Literal prison. Considered one of the most dangerous prisons in the world, Literal Prison in Ecuador is plagued by extreme violence and severe human rights violations. This facility is a battleground for rival gangs, including Los Coneros and their enemies, Los Lobos and other groups, who constantly clash over control of the drug trade and territory within the prison. The violence is brutal and often deadly. In the infamous September 2021 riot, over 120 inmates were killed, with many of the victims being beheaded or mutilated in gang warfare that involved machetes, guns, and explosives. Fires were set, further contributing to the chaos and death toll. The prison is severely overcrowded and under-resourced, leading to increased violence behind the walls. There are often too few guards to maintain order, and many sections of the prison are effectively controlled by the gangs themselves. Inmates live in constant fear, with daily occurrences of violence including extortion, beatings, and even killings. In 2023 alone, at least 11 bodies and dozens of body parts, including human heads, were recovered from this prison. Human rights organizations have criticized the prison for its inhumane conditions, where inmates are denied basic rights such as adequate medical care, food, and protection from violence. The Ecuadorian government has declared states of emergency multiple times, but the deep-seated gang control and systemic issues within the prison system have made it impossible to enforce every single time. Now let's move to a prison where authorities take the backseat and the inmates do the horrible stuff to others. San Pedro Prison. This prison in Bolivia operates more like a chaotic, self-run community than a traditional prison. Instead of guards, cartel members and other powerful inmates control large parts of the facility. Violence is a daily occurrence, with prisoners enforcing their own form of order. There are no bars on the cells, and prisoners wear their own clothes instead of uniforms. Inmates must pay for their own accommodation, with wealthier prisoners buying better cells, equipped with private bathrooms and even televisions, while the poor live in overcrowded conditions. What makes San Pedro particularly unique is that families of the prisoners, including children, are allowed to live inside the prison. This has led to dangerous environments for children, who are often exposed to drug abuse and violence. Some sections of the prison are riddled with cocaine trade, adding to the atmosphere of corruption and lawlessness. You could even say that the prison operates like a small city, complete with restaurants, markets, and services, like hairdressers and carpenters. Prisoners must find ways to earn money, either through jobs inside the facility or by receiving money from outside. The prison is governed by inmate committees, which handle everything from maintenance to conflict resolution, although extortion, threats, and beatings are frequent ways to maintain control within the inmate population. Next is a prison where some cartel members once lived a lavish lifestyle until the authorities turned it into a living hell for them. Tocaron Prison. Tocaron Prison, one of Venezuela's largest, was notoriously controlled by inmates, particularly the Tren de Aragua gang. This prison essentially functioned as the gang's base, equipped with amenities like a zoo, a swimming pool, and gambling rooms. Authorities even discovered a room dedicated to Bitcoin mining operations there. However, most inmates lived in harsh conditions, paying fees to avoid punishment and rent for cramped 2x2 meter spaces. The control of prisons by gangs is a familiar story in Venezuela, but Tocaron stood out as a stark symbol of governmental failure. This notoriety prompted a massive crackdown. More than 11,000 troops from the Army and National Guard stormed the prison in a decisive operation. They managed to transfer thousands to other facilities, although about 500 inmates escaped during the operation. Today, the government claims full control over Tocaron, but the prison's troubles are far from over. It's now plagued by severe overcrowding and a lack of basic necessities, making it one of the toughest places to be incarcerated in Venezuela. Next up is a prison where inmates are packed in tightly, much like a flock of sheep in a barn. The prison cells are so tight there's barely room to breathe, let alone move. La Esperanza Prison. La Esperanza Prison, also known as Mariona, is facing serious overcrowding problems. According to government figures, more than 60,000 people were sent to prison since the state of emergency was declared, over 150 people per day. That has put an extra burden on prisons like La Esperanza. It was built for just 10,000 people, but today it has over 33,000 inmates. Imagine being packed into a tiny room with hardly any space to move. That's everyday life for the inmates there. The conditions inside are the worst. The sanitary conditions are appalling. Prisoners often often have access only to dirty water, and meals are frequently contaminated with cockroaches and other vermin, posing severe health risks. The inhumane treatment extends beyond just physical living conditions. Medical care is woefully inadequate, with many inmates suffering from untreated illnesses. On top of it, reports of corruption among the guards makes the existence of inmates very difficult, as they often exploit inmates' families for bribes. The following prison is where an infamous cartel runs the show, meaning violence is the only currency used in the prison to stay alive. La Mesa State Penitentiary. This prison in Baja California, Mexico, is considered one of the most notorious prisons in Latin America. Built for 2,000 inmates, it currently has over 7,000 dangerous cartel members. Inside La Mesa, the treatment of inmates, particularly those associated with cartels, can be brutal. Cartel members often find themselves either running parts of the prison economy or becoming targets due to rivalries. The power dynamics within the prison can turn violent, with factions fighting for control over resources and territory within the facility itself. Also, some prison guards were reported to have taken bribes in exchange for releasing prisoners or offering better conditions. In La Mesa prison, those who can't afford bribes for better treatment often face a grim fate, being sent to torture cells. In these hidden corners of the prison, inmates are subjected to severe and inhumane forms of abuse. Reports indicate that torture methods may include physical beatings, electrical shocks, and prolonged isolation in extremely confined spaces. Moving on from the grim conditions of La Mesa prison, known for its overcrowding, lack of hygiene, and overall distressing environment, there's another facility that's even more scary for cartel members: El Hongo Prison. El Hongo Prison in Baja California, Mexico, is where any trace of humanity slowly fades. Opened in 2002 as the first state penitentiary in nearly 2 decades, El Hongo is seen as a model facility in Mexico's effort to reform its prison system. At a time when 65 of the country's 101 most overcrowded prisons were under inmate control, El Hongo is one of the few exceptions. The prison uses strict security to keep control. It has advanced technology like fingerprint and eye scanners, cameras everywhere, guard towers to stop any trouble. Unlike other prisons, inmates aren't allowed to carry money, and drug addicts are not accepted inside. Special dogs and equipment inspect everything coming into the prison to prevent smuggling. El Hongo's rules are harsh as well. If inmates are caught fighting, they are sent to isolation cells, where they can be kept for days without food or water. The prison's design, inspired by U.S. supermax facilities, focuses on making escape or internal chaos impossible. This strict environment is part of Mexico's effort to regain control over its prisons, making El Hongo one of the most tightly controlled places for inmates in the country. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, check out the suggested content on your screen by clicking one of the cards displayed.